Every offseason, we get a bunch of bold predictions for the upcoming season, and today, a new article was released by Judy Batista of the NFL Network, and in this article, they give out 10 bold predictions, and today I wanted to react to these and give you guys my personal opinion on her hot takes. So as you guys can see, this is the article here. We have 10 bold predictions we're going to get through. The article is bold predictions for 2024 NFL season. Again, shout out to Judy Batista. Let's get into it. Her first hot take is that the Chicago Bears are going to make the playoffs with Caleb Williams leading the way. I kind of tend to agree. One thing I do like about this Bears roster is the overall construction of both the offense and defense. As we all know, defensively speaking, this is one of the better units in the NFC. In fact, I think there's a pretty good case to be said that this might be the best defense in the entire NFC North. Now, while I'm not going to sit here and tell you guys upright that is 100% true or not, I do think it is one of the better units in the league. And offensively speaking, you have everything you really want offensively. You have a really good running back in DeAndre Swift, a great tight end in Cole Kmet, a trio of wide receivers that are really exciting with guys like DJ Moore, Rome Odunze, and Keenan Allen. And if Caleb Williams could be the quarterback that we all think he can be, this is a Bears team that could easily make the playoffs. Not to mention, they actually don't have too difficult of a schedule. So while I have not done my personal predictions as to how the season is going to go down yet, I wouldn't be too surprised if I get down to predicting each team's schedule and each team's wins and losses if the Bears were to somehow make it into the wild card in my playoff predictions. So for this one, I don't necessarily think it's too likely to happen, but I also think it's pretty valid in her opinion. The second one is one that I actually kind of agree with in a lot of ways. The New York Jets make the playoffs, but they lose in the divisional round. One thing I really do like about this Jets team is that they've done a really good job of attacking the offseason to fix their glaring issues that they had last year. Last year, one of the biggest issues this Jets team had offensively, outside of course the injuries to Aaron Rodgers, was the overall play of the offensive line and the receiving core alongside Garrett Wilson. Well, now you go out there and get a bunch of established veterans as well as some young guys to play alongside guys like Garrett Wilson. Of course, you're bringing guys like Tyron Smith and Morgan Moses, and now Aaron Rodgers has a very good receiving core to work with as well as an offensive line that's actually functional. And with Breece Hall being one of the best running backs in the NFL, this New York Jets offense can rely on their offensive line, rely on their run game, and pass the ball effectively with Aaron Rodgers, and of course still having a top 5 defense in the NFL. My only one critique I will say about this one is that the AFC is super crowded, and I think it will take a little bit of some time for this New York Jets offense to really get in flow. And it doesn't really help that week 1 you have to go up against the San Francisco 49ers, which could potentially hurt the team morale. But I do think this one is very valid, and I actually wouldn't be too surprised if the Jets were to make it to the playoffs and make a deep playoff run. In this case, they say they're going to lose in the divisional round. I wouldn't go that far, but it's definitely likely that it could happen. Number 3, Saquon Barkley just misses getting 2,000 yards from scrimmage, but the Philadelphia Eagles return to the Super Bowls. I don't really know about this one. There's a lot to get to with it. Saquon Barkley, for me, his biggest issue is just, can he stay healthy? 2,000 yards from scrimmage is actually kind of insane though. To me, there's really only one running back in the NFL that I truly do believe can get over 2,000 yards from scrimmage, and that's going to be Christian McCaffrey and maybe Bijan Robinson, but I also don't think that's very likely. And given the fact that Saquon Barkley is a really good player, but as somebody who has been injury prone from time to time, I don't really know if he's going to be able to get close to 2,000 yards from scrimmage. Now, that being said, I'm not going to completely rule it out because, again, I think Saquon Barkley is a hell of a back who can also be a very good yards after catch type of guy as well, but I don't really know if this team is going to be using him every single down and putting that much miles on his legs, given the fact that he's already had a number of injuries throughout his young career. I know this team doesn't really have a fantastic running back behind him, but I just don't think it's very likely that they're going to try to use him, especially early on in the year, to try to get him close to that 2,000 yards from scrimmage. I think that's very unlikely. And then the second part of this is that the Philadelphia Eagles will return back to the Super Bowl. This is a really hard one to predict. I don't personally think that the Eagles will get to the Super Bowl, but that's just because I have a little bit more faith in teams like the Packers, the Lions, and the 49ers. And I don't really love the coordinators for the Eagles, but I also would not be shocked at all if this Eagles team were to win the NFC East and make a deep playoff run and potentially do make the Super Bowl. So I'm not going to come out here outright and say that she's making a ridiculous take. This is her opinion yet again, so I don't agree with it 100%, but I also can definitely see her opinion here. Number 4, on the same lines about the NFC East, the Cowboys lose the NFC East, make an early playoff exit, fire Mike McCarthy, and hire Bill Belichick for 2025. I agree with portions of it. I disagree with the back end of it. Let's talk about it. So one thing I will agree on is that I don't think the Cowboys should be the front runner for the NFC East this year. I do believe that the Philadelphia Eagles are more equipped to win the NFC East this year. And hell, you can make the case that had the Eagles not had a complete collapse in last year's season, that they probably would have won the NFC East last year too. But what I do agree on is the fact that I think the Cowboys lose the NFC East, and I do think they are for an early playoff exit, whether that's in the wild card or the divisional round. I don't think they make it to that third round, which they want to make. My issue really isn't with the firing of Mike McCarthy. It's the hiring of Bill Belichick. I don't think that's very likely at all. Now, Bill Belichick does sort of feel like the type of guy that Dallas could potentially be interested in, and I'm not saying that it's completely out of the possibility of happening, but I personally just feel like Bill Belichick is the type of guy who wants to have control of the roster and what pieces get added to it, and I just don't think Jerry Jones is going to allow Bill Belichick to have that sort of responsibilities. Not to mention, if you're Dallas, I think you have to learn from your mistakes of hiring guys like Mike McCarthy and Jason Garrett, guys who were veteran guys. I guess Jason Garrett not so much, but Mike McCarthy was. I think this would be a Cowboys team that should be more interested in a guy like a Ben Johnson or a younger guy who has a little bit less experience, but is a maybe more imaginative play caller rather than a guy like Bill Belichick. Number 5, the Bengals go to the AFC Championship game. This one's interesting. I don't know how to really talk about this one quite yet because there's so much unknowns about this Bengals team, but I don't completely disagree with it. Anytime you have Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, a pretty solid offensive line and a pretty solid defense, and a lot of experience that was going to help you in the playoffs, it's always going to give you a heads up chance of making it to that AFC Championship game. But when you're in an AFC with a lot of really good teams like the Kansas City Chiefs, the Buffalo Bills, the Miami Dolphins, the Jets, the Ravens, the Steelers, the Browns, so on and so forth, it makes it that much less likely for a team like the Bengals to get into that spot. Again, I don't want to take it all out of context here and say that the Bengals have no chance of making it to the AFC Championship game. But me personally, I just think it's way too early to be making a bold prediction like this, especially when there's a lot of question marks surrounding the receiving core with guys like Jamar Chase and T. Higgins wanting new contracts. So I'm not going to sit here and blatantly tell you guys the Bengals won't make the AFC Championship game. In fact, I think there's a small chance that they do it. I think it's definitely a possibility, but I just don't think right now we can make that big claim when we're talking about being in May, waiting for the season to start. Next up, the Chiefs three-peat. Honestly, I don't disagree with this one that much. I know it kind of sounds a little lame. Chiefs got significantly better, and yes, they've had a busy and crazy offseason with a bunch of headlines and allegations and a lot of legal stuff. This is still a fantastic team with all the ingredients to make another championship run, especially when last year was probably the weakest they'll ever be, at least for the next couple years. But this past year, they went out there and got obviously Rashee Rice, Xavier Worthy, Hollywood Brown. Defensively, yes, you lost L'Jarius Sneed, but it's not that big of a deal in my opinion. That's still a fantastic defense. This is a pretty likely one to happen, unfortunately. I think the Chiefs have a really strong chance of winning their third straight championship this year. Next is Tom Brady stays retired and stays in the broadcast booth. I don't really have an opinion on this one. I don't think he'll come back to the league just because I don't know what team would really take Tom Brady, especially with all of the unknowns that comes with having a 40-year-old quarterback, even if it is a guy who's as great as Tom Brady. The only team that I think maybe potentially could get a guy like Tom Brady to come out of retirement would be a contending team that maybe loses their starting quarterback for an injury, such as let's say the Cowboys or the Eagles or somebody like those guys. Next is Kirk Cousins keeps Michael Penix Jr. on the bench in Atlanta, but Russell Wilson gets benched for Justin Fields in Pittsburgh. I can definitely see this being a real possibility. We'll start off with the Kirk Cousins portion of this one because that one in my opinion is a little bit more obvious. As long as Kirk Cousins can stay healthy, they're not going to bench him even if he doesn't play up to the expectations that this team maybe has. When you pay a guy $180 million for 4 years, you basically are committing to him for the long term, and I don't think that they're going to go out there and give Michael Penix Jr. the start, even if they did spend a high enough draft pick to get him. Would it be an intriguing story, and would there be rumors and headlines basically every single week if Kirk Cousins is to struggle? 100%, but I don't see that happening this year, maybe next year or the year after that. I think it's more than likely going to happen that Kirk Cousins will be the starting quarterback all of this year, all of next year, and maybe in 2026 or 27, we actually get our first look at Michael Penix Jr. as the full-time starter for the Atlanta Falcons. The second one, though, to me is a bit more interesting. Russell Wilson gets benched for Justin Fields in Pittsburgh. This one will only happen, of course, if Russell Wilson struggles, and to be honest with you, I don't really think he's going to struggle that much for Pittsburgh. Last year with the Denver Broncos, he actually played relatively well given the situation that was around him, and now he's playing for a team in Pittsburgh that has arguably a better situation both offensively and defensively, and of course the coaching staff as well. I think as long as Russell Wilson plays as good as he did last year, I don't think he's going to get replaced at all, unless the team just really struggles with him leading the team to victories and maybe they want a more explosive piece like Justin Fields. What I will say about this hot take is that I do think Justin Fields will see some playing time, but I don't think it's going to be necessarily playing that quarterback position. I could definitely see a situation where they have both Russell Wilson and Justin Fields taking snaps periodically. So we just kind of have to keep an eye out on that, but no, I don't think Russell Wilson will get benched for Justin Fields. Next one is Derrick Henry goes for 1,600 rushing yards with the Baltimore Ravens. I'm going to say no, and that's not because Derrick Henry isn't talented, but it's just the fact that he's getting up there in age. They have a good offensive line. They have Lamar Jackson. They have so many different weapons to work with that I just don't think it's very likely that an older running back like Derrick Henry would need or have to go for 1,600 rushing yards. Again, is he capable of doing that? Potentially, but they don't really need him to do all that. Really, what they need Derrick Henry to do is go out there and rush for 1,200 yards, be really good and consistent the entire year, maybe average 4.5 yards per carry, and allow some of the other guys behind him, maybe some more explosive backs, to take a bit more of the lead role from time to time. So to say that Derrick Henry is going to go for 1,600 rushing yards to me is completely ridiculous. Now, if you were to say 1,600 scrimmage yards, which means rushing and catching, I would still probably say no, but I could definitely see that being a possibility. I just think, in my opinion, for the Baltimore Ravens, the best thing that they should do is to use Derrick Henry maybe 15 to 20 times a game to preserve his legs, so that way when he gets to the playoffs, his legs are ready to go and he can be the guy that leads this team to a deeper playoff run. I don't think this team really needs him to go for 1,600 rushing yards. I think that's a ridiculous take. Last up here, Jim Harbaugh poses an immediate challenge to the Chiefs, and I disagree. I'm gonna say this right now. I've been in a lot of different interactions with Chargers fans, and a lot of Chargers fans think they're gonna be really good next year, and I can definitely see why. It's actually a really solidly constructed roster, given the fact that they're going through a retooling / maybe a small rebuild in certain position groups. But to say they're going to give a challenge to the Kansas City Chiefs today is a little bit ridiculous. I like Jim Harbaugh. I love Justin Herbert. I like some of the pieces offensively and defensively. They are not ready to compete for the Kansas City Chiefs spot. Let's not forget the Chiefs have won back-to-back championships, and sure, maybe they could win a regular season game against them, but I don't think this Jim Harbaugh-led team is going to be good enough to seriously give the Kansas City Chiefs a hard run for their money, especially when it comes to winning the division or in a playoff game if they somehow make the playoffs. Again, Chargers fans have been telling me consistently, like, no, this Chargers team is going to win 10 plus games, and for me, I just see all the big time holes that this team has, and they're definitely, in my opinion, not a team that can win 10 plus games. Now, I would definitely eat crow on this one if I am wrong. Again, in my video I made about the Chargers, I said they're going to win somewhere between 4 to 8 games next year, but I definitely do lean more so in like that 7 to 8 range rather than the 4, 5, 6 range. So maybe I misspoke there and should have said they're going to win somewhere between 6 to 8 to 9 games next year, but I don't really think they're going to give the Chiefs that much of a run for their money. Again, maybe they'll beat them in the regular season, but I think the Chiefs will probably cruise to winning the division pretty easily. In my opinion, if there is a team within that division that could give the Kansas City Chiefs a run for their money, it's probably more than likely going to be the Raiders, because the Raiders roster is really good outside of the quarterback position, which is kind of the only question mark about that team. But I think that defense could really hurt the Chiefs. I don't really know right now if the Chargers have that. I will say Justin Herbert is that guy, and he could definitely lead this team to a couple victories just on his own shoulders by himself. But I just have so many different question marks about this team, and in an AFC and in an NFL that's just won by the margins and won by how many weaknesses did your team have, I don't know if this Chargers team is ready to compete this year, especially with the likes of the Kansas City Chiefs. But you guys tell me, do you guys agree? Do you guys disagree? What do you guys think about her personal takes, and what do you guys think on my reaction to those takes? And if you enjoyed the video, hit the like and subscribe button, and I love you guys. Peace.